Imagine for a moment that you have been dropped onto the East European plain. It is 15,000 years ago, the height of the last glacial maximum. The world around you is not just cold, it is hostile. The temperature hovers at 40 degrees below zero. The wind doesn't just blow, it screams across the ice, stripping the heat from your body in seconds. But the cold isn't your biggest problem. Your biggest problem is the horizon. Look around you. There is nothing. No mountains, no caves, and most importantly, no trees. For 1,000 miles in every direction, the landscape is a flat, frozen desert of scrub and snow. If you were a modern human dropped here, you die. You look for wood to build a shelter, but there is no wood. You look for a cave to hide in, but the ground is flat. Without a thermal barrier, the wind chill will kill you before the sun goes down. And yet, right here, in the middle of this frozen hell, archaeologists found something impossible. They didn't find frozen bodies, they found a village, and in that village they found a house that defies everything we thought we knew about the Stone Age. It wasn't a tent, it wasn't a hole in the ground, it was a 20-ton fortress, an architectural masterpiece that rivaled the complexity of a Gothic cathedral. But it wasn't built of stone, and it wasn't built of timber. It was built entirely from the skeletons of giants. This is the story of the Mammoth Bone House. It is the ultimate proof that our ancestors didn't just survive the Ice Age because they were tough. They survived because they were the greatest structural engineers on Earth. Most history books gloss over the how. They tell you that early humans were hunter-gatherers who lived in caves. But the people of the Mezhirich site in Ukraine prove that the caveman is a myth. Think about the logistics of the problem. You need to build a permanent structure that can withstand hurricane-force blizzards, but you have no mortar, no bricks, and no beams. So, you look at the only natural resource available to you, the woolly mammoth. To us, a mammoth is an extinct animal. To the people of the steppe, a mammoth was a walking quarry. A single adult male mammoth provides over 200 distinct bones, ranging from massive, dense pillars to flat, wide plates. But you can't just pile bones up and hope they stay. Bones are organic. They are curved, irregular, and awkward. If you try to stack femurs like logs, the wall rolls away. If you try to balance skulls, they crush under their own weight. To turn a skeleton into a house, you have to stop thinking like a butcher and start thinking like a mason. The structure they built wasn't a temporary hut. It covered over 600 square feet. It utilized the bones of nearly 100 distinct mammoths. And when you analyze the architecture, you realize that every single bone was chosen for a specific structural property. They were sorting the skeleton by compressive strength, tensile flexibility, and thermal mass. Let's deconstruct this house from the ground up, starting with the foundation. Building on permafrost is a nightmare. If you build directly on the frozen ground, the heat from your home melts the ice, the mud shifts, and your house collapses. Modern engineers in Siberia still struggle with this today. The Ice Age builders solved it 15,000 years ago. They created a circular base using the lower jaw bones, the mandibles of the mammoth. Now, why mandibles? Because of their shape. A jawbone is a heavy V-shaped wedge. It is essentially a prefabricated locking block. The builders would take these 100-pound jaws, turn them upside down, and interlock them chin to joint in a perfect circle. At the Mezhirich site, they didn't just throw them in a pile, they arranged them in a specific herringbone pattern. This wasn't for decoration, this was for stability. By weaving the bones together, they created a rigid, self-supporting ring that acted as a massive snowshoe, distributing the weight of the walls across the unstable ground. Inside this ring, they packed earth and clay, elevating the floor level. This created a thermal break. The cold from the permafrost couldn't travel up through the bone, and the heat from the hearth couldn't travel down to melt the ice. It was a floating foundation, identical in principle to the concrete slabs we use in modern construction. But the walls were the easy part. The true genius of the Mammoth Bone House is the roof. How do you span a 15-foot wide room without a single wooden beam? In traditional architecture, this is the lintel problem. You need something long and straight to bridge the gap. But there are no straight lines in a skeleton. If you lay a flat roof of hides across the walls, the first heavy snowfall will crush it. The weight of Arctic snow is incredibly heavy, up to 20 pounds per square foot. A flat roof is a death sentence. You need a dome. You need an arch that transfers the weight of the snow down into the walls. So, they use the tusks. A mammoth tusk is a masterpiece of biological engineering. It is curved, incredibly dense, and has high tensile strength. The builders realized that if you take two large tusks and oppose them, curving them inward towards a central point, you create a rudimentary arch. They built a latticework of these tusks, interlocking them at the apex of the roof. They essentially built a rib cage for the house. By tying these tusks together with rawhide lashings, they created a tension-based dome. When the snow fell on top, the weight didn't crush the roof, it actually made it stronger. The pressure of the snow pushed the tusks tighter together, locking the arch in place. This is the exact same physics used in the flying buttresses of Notre Dame, predating the invention of the stone arch by 10,000 years. Now, we have to address the most terrifying number associated with these houses: 95. Archaeologists have determined that a single dwelling at the Mezhirich site contained the bones of 95 distinct mammoths. For a long time, this baffled researchers. It implies a level of violence that makes no sense. Hunting a mammoth was the most dangerous activity a human could undertake. It was a chaotic, life-threatening brawl with a 6-ton angry beast. To kill 95 of them just to build a single house, that is logistically impossible. No tribe could kill that many animals that quickly without getting wiped out themselves. This leads to a fascinating conclusion about their economy. They weren't hunting these animals for the house, they were mining them. The tribes likely located their settlements near natural graveyards, riverbends or ravines where herds would migrate for thousands of years. Old or sick animals would die there or get trapped in flash floods. Over centuries, these spots became massive deposits of bone. This changes our entire view of these people. They weren't just hunters living hand to mouth. They were industrial scavengers. They were logistics managers. Imagine the effort required to transport 20 tons of bone from a riverbed to a building site miles away without wheels or horses. They had to organize labor, sort the materials, stockpile specific bones for summer construction, and manage a supply chain. This wasn't a temporary camp. This was a planned city. So, the house is built. It is sturdy, it is windproof, but it's still 40 degrees below zero outside. You need heat. And this brings us back to the problem of the trees. You cannot burn wood. You can burn dry dung, which was common, but dung burns fast and offers very little light. To survive the long dark of the winter, you need a fuel source that burns hot and slow. The solution was once again the mammoth. Fresh bone, or bone that has been preserved in permafrost, is not just calcium. It's a sponge filled with marrow and grease. It's incredibly rich in lipids. If you get a fire hot enough, bone doesn't just char, it burns. Inside these houses, archaeologists found distinct heaths designed with air channels to increase the draft. The occupants were using the waste scraps of the mammoth, the broken shards, the porous hip bones, as fuel bricks. Mammoth bone, when burned, produces a steady, high heat, similar to coal. It was a closed-loop system. The animal provided the food, the skeleton provided the shelter, and the waste provided the heat. They were living inside a machine made of mammoth, powered by mammoth. When we stand back and look at the mammoth bone house, we have to stop using the word primitive. A primitive shelter is a pile of sticks that blows over in a storm. This was a home. The interiors were lined with prepared furs, likely dyed with ochre. They had designated areas for tool making, amber processing, and food storage. They were acoustic chambers where stories were told while the wind howled outside, unable to penetrate the walls of skull and clay. These people didn't survive the Ice Age because they were brute savages. They survived because they looked at a pile of skeletons and saw potential. They looked at a hostile, empty world and engineered a way to conquer it. They were the first architects, and in the frozen dark of prehistory, they built a monument to human ingenuity that has lasted longer than the pyramids. So, the next time you hear about the caveman of the Ice Age, remember this: the smart ones didn't live in caves, they lived in cathedrals of their own design.